So today we are going to learn about laws of reflection. Reflection is simply when the light falls onto the object, it bounces back. That is called as reflection. What is the difference between regular reflection and diffuse reflection? In the regular reflection, all the reflected rays, they are parallel to each other. In the diffused reflection, the reflected rays, they are not parallel. They are simply not parallel. Reflected rays are in one direction. In the diffused reflection, reflected rays are scattered in different directions. So whenever you say a law, it means some scientist must have done some experiment. From those experiments, he came to this conclusion. So that is how we use it as a law. So what is the first law of reflection? So what it says is the angle of incidence is always equal to angle of reflection. So this is always true. What is the second law? Second law says that the incident ray, the reflected ray and normal, all these three always lie in the same plane of incidence. A point, it is a 0 dimension. A line, it is a 1 dimension. Then we have a plane, there is a 2 dimension. Then we have a some shape like a cuboid or something, there is a 3 dimension. So this one here is a plane. So for example, can you see the screen? This screen is a 2-dimensional shape. Hello, hi everyone. So welcome to our YouTube channel. So today we are going to learn about laws of reflection. So let's begin. Before that, I'll tell you about myself. So my name is Dr. Akash. I have done PhD in physics from National University of Singapore. I have BSMS dual degree from Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, that is IISA Pune. I was a ranker in IIT JEE Advanced, and I also have 7 years of teaching experience. This is about me. So let's begin. So here, what is reflection of light? Reflection is simply when the light falls onto the object, it bounces back. That is called as reflection. Here you can see there is a mountain, right? So on this, for this mountain, we get an image. There is an image of the mountain. So this would be our object. For this object, you are getting an image. So that is nothing but reflection. So what exactly happens? Let's suppose there is a peak of the mountain. So from here, light falls at this place, right? From this point, light comes and fall at this place. And from here, it is getting reflected and then reach to our eyes. So that is why we are able to see this object in the water. That is called as reflection. Same thing happens in the mirror. This, whatever we are seeing inside the mirror, that is the image of the object, right? This image is forming behind the mirror. So that we are going to learn today. Now there are two types of reflection depending on whether this surface is smooth or if it is rough. If the surface is smooth, for example, you can see here there is a smooth surface, and this one here, it is a rough surface. Then clearly say this is a rough. So now if these are the incident rays, so what are incident rays? Incident ray, it could be any ray coming from a long distance and falling onto the mirror or falling onto any reflecting surface, correct? So these rays, let's suppose the rays are coming from the sun. Sun is like a source of light which is very far. So for that case, these incident rays, they are all parallel to each other. Can you see? All the incident rays parallel to each other, they fall onto this reflecting surface and they get reflected back. So these are called as reflected rays. Now all of these reflected rays, they are also parallel to each other. So whenever you get these type of reflection in which the reflected rays, they are parallel to each other, we say that it is a regular reflection. So this one is called as regular reflection, and this one, it is called as irregular surface or diffused reflection. right? So when you have a rough surface, that is irregular surface, you get a diffused reflection. So this one here, you can see the incident rays. These are the incident rays parallel to each other. They fall onto the surface, but the reflected rays, now these are the reflected rays. They are going in different directions. So that is called as diffused reflection. So these are the two types of reflection. There is a regular reflection, there is a diffused reflection. Okay. So now, what is the difference between regular reflection and diffuse reflection? In the regular reflection, all the reflected rays, they are parallel to each other. In the diffuse reflection, the reflected rays, they are not parallel. They are simply not parallel. In the regular reflection, it occurs on a smooth and polished surface. So surface is always smooth and polished. If it is diffused, it occurs on a rough surface. So for example, what is the regular reflection? What is a regular surface? Example could be mirror or water which is still, water in the lake which is still water. And what is a diffuse reflection? It occurs, let's suppose there is a wall, right? In the wall, the reflection that happens, it is a diffuse reflection. It is not a regular reflection. Now, in the regular reflection, reflected rays are in one direction. In the diffuse reflection, reflected rays are scattered in different directions. So they get scattered. That means they move to different directions. That is the difference between regular reflection and diffuse reflection. Now, there are few terms which we should learn before we learn the laws of reflection. First of all, can you see this is the light coming from the torch? So all these rays of light, they are moving along a straight line, correct? So this one, you can say it is a beam of light, correct? Because it is like a very thick. You can measure here the thickness of this beam, right? So whenever you have a thick source of light or thick beam of light, then we generally don't call that as a ray of light. But what is a ray of light? You make sure that there is a very narrow beam of light, very narrow beam of light. So any example of a very narrow beam of light? Have you seen the lasers? The lasers, if your laser is a very good quality, it is going to be very narrow beam of light. Okay, so if you have that very narrow beam of light, then that is called as ray of light, correct? Here it is a beam, but let's suppose if you have, there is your surface, there is a mirror. On this mirror, now this one, this could be a beam, but if it is very narrow, like a laser light, laser focused light, then this one you can call it as a incident ray. Usually these light rays, they are like photons, correct? So we cannot have a single photon. It is very difficult to have just a single photon. So usually they are made up of several rays or several photons of light, and they make a single ray of light. Okay. Now you can draw this path. So how will the path look like? Something like this. This is how the path will look like. So what are these? This one here is the incident ray. The ray which is going towards the mirror, that is called as incident ray. So this point here, it is called as point of incidence, right? This is a incident ray, then the point of incidence. Then after this, ray will bounce back. So that ray is called as reflected ray. And at this point of incidence, you can draw an imaginary line. This is not a real line. This one here, dotted line, can you see? This dotted line is called as normal. So it is this imaginary line which is called as normal. Now the angle between incident ray and the normal, this angle here is called as angle of incidence, or I. Angle between normal and the reflected ray, this is called as angle of reflection, or R. Angle of incidence, angle of reflection. So these are the few terms which you should remember. Angle of incidence, angle of reflection, normal, reflected ray and incident ray. Now we can learn the laws of reflection. For example, the first law of reflection. So whenever you see this word law, it means they are proven by experiments. Proven by experiments. So scientists, they have done lot of experiments. They go to the lab, they perform the experiment and they observe. And from that observe, they have developed the science. If it is in that method, that is called as law. So whenever you say a law, it means some scientist must have done some experiment. From those experiments, he came to this conclusion. So that is how we use it as a law. So what is the first law of reflection? So what it says is, the angle of incidence is always equal to angle of reflection. So this is always true. Always. So this angle of incidence, this angle of incidence between the normal and the incident ray, and the angle of reflection, R and this I, these two are always going to be equal to each other, right? You can have any situation. For example, here, this is your normal. This would be the angle of incidence I. This would be angle of reflection R. They are always going to be equal to each other, no matter what is the surface. If the surface is rough, still the angle of incidence and angle of reflection always going to be equal to each other. Now, what is the second law? Second law says that these three, what are the three rays here? We have the incoming radiation, that is our incident ray. So the incident ray, the reflected ray and normal, all these three always lie in the same plane of incidence. Now, what is a plane? In maths, you must have learned there is something called as 0 dimension, 1 dimension, 2 dimension and 3 dimension, right? 0 dimension is simply a point. A point, it is a 0 dimension. A line, it is a 1 dimension. Then we have a plane, there is a 2 dimension. Then we have a like some shape like a cuboid or something, there is a 3 dimension. So this one here is a plane. So for example, can you see the screen? This screen is a 2-dimensional shape. For example, now if the incident ray, this incident ray is on the screen, and if the normal is also within the screen, then the reflected ray, it will not come out or it will not go into the page. It will always be within this plane. That is called as a second law of reflection. All these three always lie in the same plane of incidence. So this one is called as plane of incidence. Okay, even this one, plane of incidence. So these are the two laws of reflection. Now let's solve some questions based on this. When the angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflection. So angle of incidence is equal to angle of reflection. When this is possible? Option is always, sometimes, under special conditions, never. And the answer for that is, you should always remember, they are always equal. So this one is the correct option. They are always going to be equal to each other. Now the next question, does a diffuse reflection means the failure of laws of reflection? So do you remember what is diffuse reflection? If the surface is rough, for example, this is your surface and the incident rays, something like this. These are the incident rays. They are parallel to each other. Okay. So these are all incident rays. Now what will happen? These rays, they are diffused. They will get scattered in different direction. But does that mean it is a failure of laws of reflection? I'm going to show you now. Let's suppose at these points, there is a point of incidence, correct? So at these points, what we do, we draw the normal. So at this point, let's suppose the normal is something like this. At this point, the normal is something like this. At this point, the normal is like this. Okay, these are the three different normals. So now this would be your angle of incidence I. This I1, this would be here I2, and this would be here I3. Okay, so we have to consider we have to find out the reflected ray. So how will it reflect? From here, it will go somewhere here. There is a reflected ray such that this R1. So I1 will be equal to R1. Now at the second point, there is a I2, and this one would be your second reflected ray. So this one would be R2. So I2 will be equal to R2. At this place, at here, this would be your third reflected ray. Again, this one is R3. So I3 is equal to R3. Okay, so at every point, the angle of reflection and angle of incidence, they are always going to be equal, and they are within the same plane of incidence. So does this diffuse reflection means failure of laws of reflection? Answer is no. That would be your correct answer. Alright, so that's it for today. Thank you so much everyone. Bye bye. Enjoy.